Hey everyone, it's me again, Morning's Data on the Road, and today we are going to be talking about the weather that is going on the next few days. I hope you liked my intro. I worked a lot on it over the past day or so, and some days before, a couple of months ago, I just forgot about the project and then I revamped it. And yeah, I'm trying to start a new phase of this channel where I do those four things that I mentioned in the intro. I took away TV show reviews because I'm never really gonna do that. But otherwise, yeah, that's basically what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my channel this year. So we'll see what goes on with that. But I am going to be focusing on weather today, and I have been focusing on weather for the most part over the past few videos, so it's not a surprise that that's the first thing I'm going to do after this phase change. So, anyways, I am going to be talking about the severe weather threat that is coming today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all of those days, and probably further. We are expecting a lot of damage to be done in form of winds. Not really tornadoes. We aren't expecting many tornadoes anymore. There is more of a derecho, not really derecho, but like a wind storm type pattern that we're entering into. So we're going to be on watch for that, and there could still be a tornado risk here or there. I mean, today does have a 2% tornado risk, so we'll really see what goes on. But anyways, let's get right into the video. Alright, so the first thing we're going to look at is the 500 millibar winds and height. So basically, this is like the base level determining factor of weather events across the U.S. It basically determines when weather is going to happen, also what weather is going to happen. It's not the only factor, however, it definitely influences quite a bit and influences a risk to be noticeable, for sure. So you can measure the troughs and the ridges in the 500 millibar atmosphere, and then you can determine what weather events are going to occur from this. This is what many other weather YouTubers do first, so I'm going to do it first. But you can see over here, there is a trough that exists over here in Nebraska and Iowa. That's kind of pushing downwards. It's a positively tilted trough right now, which basically means it's just directed towards the left, and that basically means that it's a weaker system. However, you can still see that it is producing some sort of negatively tilted thing. I don't think this is quite a trough, even though it is closer to the low, so it probably is. You can see some flow over here in Michigan into Ontario and Quebec, and you can also see some forcing. If you were to draw this out, you can see there's some forcing over here. Oh, sorry, my bad. I don't have like a pen with me. I don't know. I don't have that program. But basically, if you look at my cursor, you can see some flow over here. You can see some flow over here. And in this middle area, you can see there is some forcing probably from that, as there is a little bit of spreading out with those wind vectors in the upper atmosphere. So that kind of indicates that some severe storms will occur in Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, into New Jersey, New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire. Now, as I pull this out, as we enter into the heating of the day and the severe weather becomes more prominent in this region, you can see the forcing does increase quite a bit. You can see there is a bit more of a trough in Michigan and Ontario at this point. You can also see that the winds in the upper atmosphere are slightly higher. However, that's not the only determining factor in what's going to happen, but still, as we push this out, you can see that trough slowly heading towards the northeast, and then weakening with those winds in the upper atmosphere as we enter out of the main heating point of the day and into tomorrow morning. Then you can see another trough is trying to develop here in Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and Missouri on the upper atmosphere. This is slightly negatively tilted, but I don't think it's really going to cause anything. It's very high up in the atmosphere. It seems not very strong, but you can see that there is some influence from it, and it will influence our risk tomorrow, which is just a marginal risk, so we're not really expecting much tomorrow. You can see this is very wide of a trough. When the trough is very wide, it doesn't really make the severe weather more widespread. It kind of does, but what it mainly does is spread all of the energy out to where it's not going to be very much energy in one specific area for severe weather. So that's what we're kind of seeing here. We're still going to see some risks in this area. However, what we're mainly watching is as we go into Wednesday. Wednesday, you can see there's a much more prominent trough with much higher winds in the Pacific Northwest, and that will move down into the southern United States and central United States, where it will be causing some severe weather. I looked at the risk. It's mostly Missouri and Illinois on Wednesday. I'll go to the SBC risks in a second. This is the NAM, so it doesn't go out fully. However, you can see there is a very strong trough trying to develop over here. Still positively tilted at this moment. However, you can see there is also a very deep low in the atmosphere, and that is indicating that there is going to be some flow aloft, and this will head towards the Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois area. You can see there is some short waves too. Short waves basically influence the tornadic potential of these storms. Not always, but also some winds too. You can see there's a small little short wave, I believe, in Illinois there, but it's very small, if it is one. And you can see a smaller one in Illinois and Indiana too. So that is probably where our main severe weather risk is going to be. You can see over here, that is where it also exists partially in Missouri too, but you can see some strong winds aloft. But that is not all. Then we move on, and let me just get out of these ads. I don't think I can, never mind. Oh, yes, I can. Okay, so then we move on to our next product, in this case, which will be severe weather, the reflectivity that we're actually going to see with this atmosphere. And we'll get into the SBC risks later. That will be something we do as a result of what we have seen and basically we can compare what we've seen with all the models there. So let's move on to our risks today, main area, and that will be the Northeast U.S. You can see this is where everything starts. This is in the Northeast, so there's not a very high likelihood that this will be insane severe weather like we saw a couple of days ago, especially since it's in the Northeast. But it'll be similar to that event that we saw on Friday with the severe weather in the Northeast. I would say it could be potentially a more severe event. However, I don't think it's going to be like anything insane. I think it's just going to be a big windstorm for many of us, and we'll see how much it impacts us. So, looking at the future, you can see there is some storms in Canada which are forecasted on this model, and that is what the case is right now. However, the main storms don't get going until this is approximately 15Z, which is 15 UTC, and at this time, it's 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time. You can see this is where the storms first appeared. We kind of see those storms already in Eastern Canada, all the way down to Eastern Michigan. So we already have seen those storms, and they enter into Canada quickly, into the Ontario area. But soon we see this whole line develop, and that is due to the cold front. The cold front is surging out, and due to the forcing, that is what is causing the cold front. However, you can see there is a couple of storms out in front. Now, these are likely not going to do much. You can see one stronger storm up here in Vermont. However, I do think that they have some tornado potential. Very little, though, as this area is not very conducive for tornadoes. If we look at the other conditions in the severe weather tab, you can see the bulk shear is okay for the storms in Pennsylvania specifically, and that storm in Vermont also has some bulk shear. You can see the mixed layer cape, and it really is not that good. That's the main thing I'm looking at. If you look at the AGL cape, it also isn't that good, especially in these areas where the supercells, you could say, I put that in quotations because they're not really supercells in this environment, that's where they exist. But you can see there's still some cape in Vermont, but it's a very, very low, and I'm not really expecting much. The main area for conductivity is probably over here in Ohio, and as you can see with this reflectivity, the line's already kind of reaching there. Here, wait, let me switch to this. The line's already beginning to reach there, kinda, and there's no storms firing there. If you look a little later, though, I do think some storms develop or the line gets closer. You can see the line kind of breaks up a little bit, and that might be an indicator of probably, like, maybe a potential for less winds in certain areas and more winds in other areas, but you can see there's also a lot of severe storms that develop in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, southwestern Pennsylvania to be specific. I'm going to look at the environment here too, just because it seems like that might be interesting. The SRH in this area is very low. It's definitely not much. Up in here in northeastern West Virginia, there is a small amount of SRH, which might be conducive. The main SRH is over here in northern Pennsylvania and western New York, and that might be an indicator of potentially some severe storms. You can also look at this, but I'm not going to see anything. This is a significant tornado parameter, and we're obviously not going to see anything, especially since it's not really very conducive for significant tornadoes. And the supercell composite, the same thing there. You can also look at the most unstable cape, which will show that there is some cape in western Pennsylvania. However, it's not really that big of a concern. We'll go to the southern risk later. There is a more southern risk in this region, and that might be more conducive for more elements of severe weather. If you were to take a sounding of this area, let's look over here in central Pennsylvania where it looks like the main ingredients are. You can see there is a tornado risk here. That isn't actually a bad photograph, but honestly, with the conditions that we're seeing, I'm not expecting much tornadic activity. There would have to be more of a dry slot here, I think. It's a little bit of a dry slot, and there is good temperature spread, but I'm honestly not thinking much with it. If you look at the storm slinky, it's a little bit of turning with height. I'm not sure exactly what the storm slinky means. I'm not perfect at these. And you can see there is moderate turning with height. It's not anything insane, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a weak tornado with these storms. If you look in this area, there are potentially some storms approaching this region. If you look over here, there is a few storms probably near the Emporium area that have some potential. If you look as we go later on, they do develop slightly, but it's mostly the line that overtakes them. So I'm not really expecting much with these storms, and I'm unsure if they will produce any tornadoes or anything like that. We are watching this area just in case, and that's why there's a 2% tornado risk outlined. Look up here in Vermont. We're also going to take a sounding here. In Vermont, you can see there's very little tornado risk. It's a marginal severe risk. You can see very little temperature difference over there. SRH is very low. The Cape is also very low in most places. The mid-level Cape is especially low, even though I think it's usually lower than compared to everything else. If you look over here at the SDP and CIN, which I'm pretty sure is the cap, this is not really going to do much. I'm pretty sure you can see there's a lot less spread for that non-tor probability, so you can see there's not really leverage with that. I'm not perfect with these soundings. I am trying to get better at them, so if I say anything wrong, just let me know. However, I don't think this is really conducive for anything, especially up here in Vermont, which makes sense. But then looking back over here in Pennsylvania, I'm going to take one more sounding. It doesn't look that conducive. You can see there's a small little hint of tornadic potential over here. However, I'm not really seeing much. It's a very strange environment today, I would say. It's weird because there's like little pockets of tornadic potential with these storms. However, it's really not that much. I'm thinking the wind will be the main concern, and that's what the meteorologists are thinking too. You can see there is definitely a lot of potential for wind, especially with the Moo Cape, the mid to upper level Cape, and also some of the inflow SRH. You can see that there is some chances for some winds in this area, but I'm not expecting much tornadic activity, except for maybe that brief moment at around 5 p.m. in northern Pennsylvania. However, now we'll get into the southern risk because it looks like that risk is going to be a little more conducive for severe weather. You can see there's a bunch of little severe storms in this region. You can see over here in Virginia and North Carolina, there's a little bit of storms straddling the border there, and I am expecting there will be some isolated severe winds in this region, especially in eastern Virginia up to Washington, D.C. area. And there is also a little potential for a little line to develop down here in South Carolina. I'm not looking at the other models, so let's see if there's consistency with that. You can see there isn't really consistency with that line, so I wouldn't really expect much from it, but we're still watching it. Let's look at the RFSA. That is also not really depicting a line. And the thing is, the RFSA always likes to overblow the convection a little bit, but it doesn't look that bad in this case. I mean, you can see there is some storms down here, and there's a little bit of tornadic potential with these probably, but probably not as much as the windstorm in Pennsylvania. Let's actually check the severe weather threat in this region. We can see there is some shear, but it's definitely not nearly enough for big tornadoes or anything like that. The main shear is once again in northern Pennsylvania. You can also look at the mixed layer cape. It is better in this region over here in Virginia, especially along in the Chesapeake Bay. Actually, there's about 2,000 joules per kilogram. And then if we look at the most unstable cape, there is a moderate amount of cape in all layers. So that will indicate that there is some potential for mainly severe storms. But if you look at the capping here too, it's not that bad in this region of Virginia. Also, you can see there is a bit of a cap in northern Pennsylvania, except for in here. So I think the main risk will be right out ahead of that main capping issue. It's not that bad of a cap anywhere in the Northeast, really. But I do think that will be the main issue, is some capping. But that won't get rid of the wind potential that will still be possible with these storms. So I do think that's still a possibility. And you can see down here in Virginia, it's not that bad. In North Carolina, it's a much more of a cap in place. So we'll see how it ends up playing out, especially on this model, if it's similar to this model or anything like that. But definitely still an interesting setup that we're seeing today. If you look at the photographs in this region, it's not bad, but I'm not really seeing anything crazy. You can see this is the cape in the background. Definitely, I still think the main risk is in northern Pennsylvania and western New York. It seems like that's going to be the main area that we have to watch here. But either way, it's still a potential for some severe winds everywhere. If you look at the winds, actually, let me look at the winds. Where would that be? I'm just going to find it because I don't know if I've ever actually done this product before. Just give me a sec. Okay, I think this works. So, this is some of the winds that we'll be seeing in the lower atmosphere. It's not quite at the ground. I don't think we can see anything at the ground. But you can see there is some winds in this region, and that probably will influence the winds at the ground to some extent. I feel like there is a better product for this, though. So, I will maybe go here. It's kind of weird. Is this a dew point? What is this? Okay, well, anyways, we have to see the dew point anyways. You can see the dew point is fairly high. That's mainly because it's June. It's not really going to do much if it is June, even in this area. However, that's why the main severe weather risk is in this area in June. So that's why we're seeing a little bit more of that cape in this region. That's why we're seeing more tornado potential too. You can see over here, there's still some cape that exists even into midnight. However, it's the main concern as we get up here. You can see there's all the way up to northern New York. There's about 60 dew points. You can see this axis of energy along the line over here in eastern Pennsylvania, where I'm expecting the main. And there is also a little potential for a little line to develop down here in South Carolina. I'm not looking at the other models, so let's see if there's consistency with that. You can see there isn't really consistency with that line, so I wouldn't really expect much from it, but we're still watching it. Let's look at the RFSA. That is also not really depicting a line. And the thing is, the RFSA always likes to overblow the convection a little bit, but it doesn't look that bad in this case. I mean, you can see there is some storms down here, and there's a little bit of tornadic potential with these probably, but probably not as much as the windstorm in Pennsylvania. Let's actually check the severe weather threat in this region. We can see there is some shear, but it's definitely not nearly enough for big tornadoes or anything like that. The main shear is once again in northern Pennsylvania. You can also look at the mixed layer cape. It is better in this region over here in Virginia, especially along in the Chesapeake Bay. Actually, there's about 2,000 joules per kilogram. And then if we look at the most unstable cape, there is a moderate amount of cape in all layers. So that will indicate that there is some potential for mainly severe storms. But if you look at the capping here too, it's not that bad in this region of Virginia. Also, you can see there is a bit of a cap in northern Pennsylvania, except for in here. So I think the main risk will be right out ahead of that main capping issue. It's not that bad of a cap anywhere in the Northeast, really, but I do think that will be the main issue, is some capping, but that won't get rid of the wind potential that will still be possible with these storms. So I do think that's still a possibility. And you can see down here in Virginia, it's not that bad. In North Carolina, it's a much more of a cap in place. So we'll see how it ends up playing out, especially on this model, if it's similar to this model or anything like that. But definitely still an interesting setup that we're seeing today. If you look at the photographs in this region, it's not bad, but I'm not really seeing anything crazy. You can see this is the Cape in the background. Definitely, I still think the main risk is in northern Pennsylvania and western New York. It seems like that's going to be the main area that we have to watch here. But either way, it's still a potential for some severe winds everywhere. If you look at the winds, actually, let me look at the winds. Where would that be? I'm just going to find it because I don't know if I've ever actually done this product before. Just give me a sec. Okay, I think this works. So, this is some of the winds that we'll be seeing in the lower atmosphere. It's not quite at the ground. I don't think we can see anything at the ground. But you can see there is some winds in this region, and that probably will influence the winds at the ground to some extent. I feel like there is a better product for this, though. So, I will maybe go here. It's kind of weird. Is this a dew point? What is this? Alright, well, anyways, we have to see the dew point anyways. You can see the dew point is fairly high. That's mainly because it's June. It's not really going to do much if it is June, even in this area. However, that's why the main severe weather risk is in this area in June. So that's why we're seeing a little bit more of that Cape in this region. That's why we're seeing more tornado potential too. You can see over here, there's still some Cape that exists even into midnight. However, it's the main concern as we get up here. You can see there's all the way up to northern New York. There's about 60 dew points. You can see this axis of energy along the line over here in eastern Pennsylvania, where I'm expecting the main risk will be. You can go back a little bit, and there is still some dew points over there, and some in Virginia and Maryland. So that area is also somewhere to watch too. But with that said, that's today's event. We gotta move on to some other events, and as we continue to look at the future, here we move on to Monday, and not this product. Let me change back to the reflectivity, and the, oh, I don't know what that was. I don't know what that was. And mainly the central U.S. We'll go to mainly the central U.S. because that's where most of the severe weather is coming up. You can see we look at tomorrow, and I'm not expecting much. I think the SBC did outline an area down here in the deep south. However, it's definitely not going to be tornadic. It's definitely not going to be that big of a risk for anything, really. Maybe hail. I am seeing some hail potential, but then it'll just move into rain. Change it to rain showers, and that'll just be a big rain potential for the southeast, probably, which is already kind of damped with some rain, especially with this El Nino pattern. You can also see there is some storms trying to develop on Tuesday. Let me get to you can see a small little storm in Iowa there, but I'm not sure if that's where the main risk is going to be. I think the main risk is actually going to be a little more west on Tuesday. I gotta look at that. So, okay, my bad. I mixed it up. It actually is tomorrow that's going to be the main western risk, which makes sense because the main winds were backing in the west. So let's move on to that area. We'll look in the central U.S. If we go back to where we were on Monday, you can see there is some storm potential. As we get into here, there's a bunch of little storms that try to develop here. They're not looking very organized. They just look like a bunch of hail makers, I would say. This is definitely more of a hail risk than anything, especially typical in the West. Or not really the West, the central U.S. But you can see some storms and isolated storms in eastern Kansas. It's probably the coverage, which is why they're not issuing any higher risks. It's not really big coverage or anything like that, so I'm not expecting much upgrade to be seen with those storms. However, as we move on to the risk in Illinois and Indiana on Tuesday, you can change the region here. You can look over here. You can see as we move on into Tuesday, there is quite a bit of storm potential, but definitely not enough to warrant many more than marginal risk. You can see there's some storms over here in Illinois, and they will develop here. Let me just charge my computer real quickly. So, here you can see some storms over here in the Illinois area, and they will continue to move into Indiana and such, but it's going to be very isolated once again. You can see a little bit of a line develops here, and some hailstorms near Chicago. That's probably the main confidence we have. You can see a couple of storms develop here, also in Michigan, northern Michigan. It's a little more widespread on Tuesday. The main reason why they're probably not assuming a higher risk is just because it's 3 days out. But there is a little more coverage over here. However, it all quickly weakens as we enter into the night. So it doesn't seem like this is going to be a big risk. If you look at the Cape in this area, it probably will be a moderate amount of Cape, not anything crazy. Okay, well, that's the nighttime, so let me move on to this. You can see there is some Cape there, about 1,000 joules per kilogram in northern Illinois. And as we go into the moment where there's a hail risk in near Chicago, you can see there is some Cape over there in that region too. But the main risks as we move on to our lower resolution models that go out further, you can see that there will be some potential on Wednesday and Thursday. So let's move on to the whole U.S. because, of course, this is a little more of a thing that we have to look at widespread, in a more widespread manner, especially since it's further out, so the location will change quite a bit. But if we look at the reflectivity, you can see there is some storms trying to develop in the eastern United States. This is a GFS, so it's not the best model out there, but it's definitely the one that will be able to go out this far. You can see there is those storms in Indiana and Illinois, as you can see there. Oh, wait, that's actually the next day's risk. My bad. I think you could see next day's risk on other models, too. Maybe the NAM. Maybe the NAM shows it better. So let's go to the NAM. Yeah, you can see there is some storm potential there in Illinois. It's not looking as much in Missouri. It does look like there's a line that develops in that region. We're looking at this together, so I haven't really looked at these models yet, but we're looking at these together. You can see there is a line that develops in Missouri, and it's moderately strong. It goes up into Indiana and Michigan. I would say that definitely has some convection with it. It's blowing up on the western side. However, if you look at the SBC risk, which I'll go to next, there is that enhanced risk issued over there in the Kansas City, St. Louis into Illinois area. That might mean that there is some derecho potential or strong wind potential in that region. However, it doesn't look too big right now, especially since we're so far out. We can't really determine much with it. However, if we look at the environment in this region, you can see that there would be a lot of 10-meter AGL wind in this region. It's kind of hard to tell because that's when the winds go away in Missouri. But you can see there is some Missouri winds in the region. I don't think that's the right product here. Let me check this. This makes more sense. So you can see these are in knots, so I don't know how to get them to miles per hour, but 55 knots is about 70 miles per hour, a little less, 65 miles per hour. So we are expecting widespread severe weather, I think, on this day, much more widespread than the previous days. But the enhanced risk is probably just telling that. I don't think it's going to be especially strong. However, we'll see what happens with it. I do think this will be more of a wind event than anything, which is probably what they're saying too. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get continue that enhanced risk for a long time ahead. You can see there's a lot of cap in this area too, so very little tornado potential too. I think that's cap. I'm unsure what that product actually means. But either way, we still are seeing these risks. And then we move on to day 5, which is a risk in near closer to my area in the northeast. That also has some potential. We have a slight risk in effect for that region. If we go on to Thursday's risk, you can see there is a similar setup to what today is showing. A few little storms in the area, especially in Pennsylvania. However, this turns into more of a wind threat pretty quickly as well. And a big mess, a big blob of wind is probably going to happen. Not quite reaching New York City, but getting pretty close to it, and maybe impacting it slightly. But you can see another big line. So, in general, what we are expecting is not as big of a severe weather threat as we have seen the past few days, especially with the tornado threat we saw in Illinois. But I do think we are still seeing quite a bit of severe weather, as typical of June. Of course, June, you can't rely on the models too much, especially since there is more mesoscale properties to June. Storms kind of just develop on the day of, and we can't really know what exactly those storms are going to do until they happen. But you can predict them in some regards. It becomes especially hard during the summer when convection just pops up as typical of thunderstorms. So, either way, this is what we're expecting over the next week. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications. If you don't know what the notifications look like, it's a bell icon right next to the subscribe button. Also, make sure to like this video. I don't care if you dislike. If you really didn't like this video, fine, dislike. But anyways, guys, it's always interesting to notice that whenever you're on the noise data on the road freeway, there is no limit. You can go as fast as you want and as free as you want. Thank you, guys. Okay, guys, so I will admit, I know the video is supposed to end, but there have been some updates to what we have been seeing, and I did want to briefly go over it. I was originally not going to post the video because I didn't think it went so well. However, with the change in conditions, I feel like it is worthy of posting, and I did want to talk about a few stuff more. So, of course, I never went over the actual outlook for today. You can see 2% tornado risk, 30% wind, so a big wind risk, and 5% hail in this general area. I didn't mention my live stream, which I might do. I'm not saying I will do it, especially with how low the tornado risk was. However, we have had a new development, of course, with the tornado watch issued in Pennsylvania, which is particularly interesting, especially since we haven't seen a tornado watch in quite a while for Pennsylvania. But I am going to watch that, especially since there are some supercells in the exact area that I highlighted. But I still have to watch it. I'll still have to see how it progresses, and maybe at like 7 I would go live, but I'm not unsure because I have some work to do, so I'm really unsure on that. However, if things get crazy enough, I will go make a live stream. Also, one thing I did want to point out is something on the hurricane side of things. Now, this is different because I usually don't talk about hurricane stuff, usually just because I don't post at that time. However, you can see there is a 30% chance of formation through the next 7 days in Texas and Louisiana, and that would impact the U.S., so I feel like it is worthy of talking about. And over here in the Pacific, there is also an area of interest, but that's out to sea. It's around the same chance as this, but this would be the first Atlantic storm that we see this year, so a lot of stuff going on, a lot of new developments, and I just wanted to make sure that that was taken across. So I'm not going to do my outro again, because, well, I already did it, but if you guys want to see me on the live stream that potentially will happen later today, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you know when I go live, and if I go live, and I'll see you there. So yeah, everybody, thank you for watching.